Well, Russia and Ukraine have long been at loggerheads, and squaring off with its larger neighbour has cost Kiev dearly. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea in Ukraine's east. Kiev has suffered an economic loss of about $58 billion as a result of that invasion. The political instability and border tensions have also deterred much-needed investments in Ukraine. The Centre for Economics and Business Research estimates Kiev is losing out on more than $10 billion of foreign investments each year. That's stifled the ability of businesses to grow, so tax revenues have been restricted by nearly $50 billion since 2014. And Ukraine's been forced to step up military spending by $15 billion each year. It's also had significant implications on the global economy. Russian troops were first detected amassing near the Ukrainian border in November. That's added to volatility in energy prices that are hurting consumers in small and large markets. The cost of natural gas, which households use to heat their homes and cook their food, is around $4.50 per unit. That's the same as it was late last year, but it spiked to as much as $6.2 earlier this month. Well, the movement in crude prices has been more dramatic because Russia is one of its top exporters. The burden on consumers is also bigger given the lack of alternatives for the commodity. At the end of November, Brent crude was trading below $70 a barrel. This month, the international benchmark reached $96 a barrel, its highest in almost 8 years. Well, let's get more on this now with Wald. She's the president of the energy consulting firm Transversal, and she joins us now from Jacksonville, Florida. Great to have you back with us, Ellen. The Ukraine crisis has sent oil prices on a bit of a roller coaster ride recently. As I mentioned, it touched $95 a barrel this week before backing away as investors really try to make sense of what's happening during this crisis. Tell us more about why we're seeing crude prices seesaw right now.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any doubt that crude prices are being influenced by events in Eastern Europe and Ukraine and Russia. And there's definitely a risk premium that is being put on crude prices right now. I think we'd probably, if none of this was happening, we'd probably see prices down in the maybe the mid 80s, perhaps even the low 80s, given what we're seeing happening with Iran at this point. So there's definitely a lot of this geopolitical activity that's acting on oil prices. And it's interesting because as the headlines shift, we see crude shifting, as much as $4 a barrel with the headline. So when a headline came out that troops were being removed from, that Russian troops were being sent back to Russia, we saw the price drop $4. But then a new headline said, well, we're not so sure if these troops have actually left, and then prices went back up. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that Russia is a major oil producer in the world. It sends a lot of oil to Europe, and it also does send quite a bit to the United States. And there are very real concerns that if Russia does launch some kind of military incursion, that the U.S. will enact some kind of sanctions that will impact Russian energy companies, either directly on Russian oil and gas or perhaps on the financial systems that are used to transact. And so that will cut off Europe and possibly the U.S. from Russian oil.
That's right. And this week, Joe Biden actually addressed that issue of potential economic sanctions on Russia, warning Americans that if that does happen, Americans could actually feel the pain in the form of higher gas prices, but also the global economy could suffer as a result of an energy crisis as well. Biden also said that the U.S. is currently taking steps to avoid that, to protect its energy market. Could this potentially reinvigorate the U.S. oil and gas industry then?
Well, that's a very difficult question because you would think that prices of, $95 a barrel would reinvigorate the U.S. oil industry all on its own, but that's actually not what we're seeing. We're seeing really very tentative, modest growth in the U.S. oil industry. In fact, we're seeing companies are now making their plans for production for the year public, and a lot of them are not planning particularly large increases in production. A lot of it is being spent on replacing production that's been lost. So I don't think that we can necessarily expect that the U.S. oil industry will somehow burst to life if there are sanctions on Russian oil. Now, one of the interesting things, though, is that Russia has actually made preparations to send a lot of its oil to China. So if it's cut off from buyers in Europe and the United States, I think what we can expect is that it will send more oil to China. China will buy that oil, potentially at somewhat of a discount. And I think we will see some reorganization in the oil markets if that happens. There will definitely be a period of high prices and dislocation as the market sorts it out. But at some level, I do think that there is plenty of oil, and so prices may be able to sort themselves out if this crisis is protracted.
Okay, let's see what happens. Ellen Wald from Transversal Consulting. A pleasure as always. Thank you for that.